Say.
And in your view, although this is a product of cultural evolution, of cultural change over the centuries, in your view, we're put on that path by genetic evolution. There's a
Well, here's a way to think about it. I think so. Yeah. Let me say it in one way and see if you agree with it. Getting back to Peter Singer, he had a lovely book called The Expanding Circle.
Right.
I don't remember whether you talked about it in John
Yeah,
Zero.
yeah.
But it basically says that the psychology of morality needn't have changed over the millennia, over all of these wonderful developments, but that one parameter, as a linguist might put it, may have changed. As if we have a dial or a slider that indicates what's the circle of people whose interests we treat as equivalent to our own.
Right.
And that maybe the default that was installed by natural selection is something like family and clan and village, but that through a cultural process, we haven't rewritten this from scratch, but what we've done is we've expanded the circle, or we've moved the slider over, so more and more people get treated the way we naturally treat our neighbors and family.
Yeah.
And that would suggest that even the loftiest universalist idea of morality, the interest of everyone on earth is equivalent to mine, is not as radical a rewriting of our moral sense as you might think.
Yeah, we've certainly been moving in that direction. And of course, Singer would like to see us eventually encompass
animals,
non-humans, right?
Yeah, and other people. I mean, there are a lot of other directions that you could do.
And it seems crazy now, but then again, where we've gotten would have seemed crazy to some people only
400 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, and among the other reasons, I'm inclined to suspect that it's at least possible that there's some kind of larger purpose unfolding is the existence of consciousness in the sense of sentience, in the sense that of subjective reality, the fact that it is like something to be alive. And you are among the commentators on sentience, who I think gives due respect to the difficulty of the problem. I think not everyone does. In fact, not everyone in the greater Boston area does, I think.
No, this is, I mean, we're definitely in agreement that there is a puzzle there, and we're both vulnerable to being accused of being Mysterians and of saying that that consciousness will never be solved, it's beyond the reach of neuroscience, which is not what I believe, and I think it's not what you believe in the sense of consciousness meaning the difference between conscious and unconscious processing. That, I think, is a perfectly tractable
And I also
problem.
don't mean it in the sense of correlating neurological phenomena with specific states of consciousness.
Right,
I think
which is a scientific problem,
Right.
and we'll know more and more. No, I think we both agree that the problem we are now talking about is why should first-person sentience or subjective experience exist to begin with?
Right.
Why should it feel like something to be me here now?
Because if you're a true materialist, then it would seem to be functionally redundant.
Yeah.
Superfluous. You agree? You kind of agree with that, or?
Yeah, or at least we don't know why it exists. I don't even know if we could state it as redundant in the sense that we don't even have the language in which to say that sentience is more than you would need. But it is something different. It is something that we wouldn't predict.
I mean, we do all agree that if you ask the question, why does the person withdraw the hand upon encountering a flame, there's a satisfactory account that is strictly physical. You can say, well, the information passes up the arm, gets processed, passes down the arm, it compels the muscles to contract.
And as a cognitive psychologist, I believe that is going to be true even for higher thought processes like writing a sonata or falling in love.
So in principle, you can explain all behavior without reference to subjective states.
Right, except if you want to just say that subjective states are things that have a structure, there are a lot of them, they have certain consequences in behavior and so on. So they could be computational states.
Computational states, but themselves can be described in physical terms, right? I mean, well, here's something you say in How the Mind Works, but in the study of the mind, sentience floats in its own plane, high above the causal chains of psychology and neuroscience.
Yeah.
Which I think,
We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and given the fact, again, if you accept the contention that a trajectory toward more and more complex sentience is inherent in evolution, if you accept my contention that that's true, That seems to me to somehow make the teleological scenarios somewhat more palatable, especially in view of the fact that sentience is what gives life meaning. I mean, it's a fact that it feels like something to be alive that makes happiness possible. It's the reason
it's bad to kill someone or hurt
right,
them and so on.
right. If
yeah.
they were robots who looked just like they look and behaved as complexly, so we wouldn't think it was any big deal to destroy one.
Yeah, it'd be a waste, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
be sinful.
Unless it was the property of a sentient being. In this case, we frown on it still.
No, I agree. And I know where you're going, which is that couldn't this mysterious stuff called sentience be a sign that there's more in heaven and earth than dreamed of in our very mechanistic, goal-less view of life? So you're taking two mysteries or problems and saying they might have the same solution, namely, why should sentience as this extra coloring or ingredient have arrived, and why does evolution, why did it at least, end up with this thing that we think is good, namely creatures with a moral sense who've actually used it to improve their lot? Mm-hmm. So putting these two together. I mean, the way I don't have any argument against that, but I have an alternative, which, well, maybe it's not an alternative, but it's an alternative way of thinking about it, is that sentience is something that is an aspect of having a highly articulated set of internal representations that evolved for an evolutionary purpose. Why it has this extra aspect of subjectivity is just something that our mind can't grasp, simply because the mind itself is a product of natural selection. And just as some of these questions about morality make your brain hurt at a certain point, and you run out of the resources with which to think of alternatives or to take a high enough bird's eye view in which to say something sensible about why it's that way as opposed to some other way, my own gut feeling is that the question of why sentience exists might be like that.
Right.
But there's a funny sense in which we have a complete understanding of sentience, and there's no mystery, namely anything you could say about it, except for the fact that it exists, anything you can say about it is perfectly amenable to causal explanation. Right. Why does sugar taste sweet, and why is sweet pleasurable? Well, I can give you a perfectly sensible evolutionary explanation of that for everything except the fact that there is this someone who's experiencing it. But if I say, what is it that you're experiencing? And you say, well, I want more of it, it puts a smile on my face, and so on. Everything you say about it, I can explain in old-fashioned evolutionary terms. So there is something maddening about it in that it's, on the one sense, completely comprehensible, and in the other sense, bafflingly incomprehensible. And what that makes me think is that we've run into some limitation in our own mind, akin to the one that makes it very difficult or impossible for us to understand that time came into existence with the Big Bang.
Right.
Well, what do you mean time started then? Well, what was it like before that? No. You're not supposed to think before that. There was no before that. Forget your ordinary way of thinking about things in terms of before and after. And my sense is that the puzzle of first-person subjective experience is a bit like that. It's a point at which we keep, it's a circle that we fall into that makes me think that there's a rule of the thinking game that is making us a victim of this, but that ultimately we may not need any notion of purpose or some other intelligence that gave it to us. It may fall out of it for reasons that our mind can't quite grasp.